Tunic is an indie game recently released on Steam, and it's not very good. Let's talk about why. So this is an isometric adventure game that's very much in the vein of your Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past or Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening, two very good games. And if you're looking at the footage right here, chances are you're thinking, hey, this looks kind of cool. The graphics are very nice, good art direction, nice animal type characters that you're playing as, and it's got all of the right bells and whistles. But it's got two big problems. The first is in its gameplay, and the second is in its puzzles. So before I say what I'm about to say, let me make one thing clear. I've beaten Dark Souls. I've beaten Dark Souls 2, I've beaten Dark Souls 3, I've beaten Sekiro, I've beaten Bloodborne, I've beaten Elden Ring. I've also beaten Salt and Sanctuary and Valdis City, just for good measure. So, before anyone says anything about my skill level, well, read it and weep. So the thing is, with Tunic, is that it's trying to be Dark Souls. You've got dodge rolls, and you've got parries, and the late game bosses in particular really emphasize you being able to master both. But here's the thing. Dodge rolls and parries do not make a Dark Souls game. Dark Souls games are meticulously crafted. You've got build options in them. You've got incredibly tight controls. You've got player tools, and you've got ingenuity that gets rewarded. It's not just a matter of putting in a dodge button and putting in a parry window. You've got to do better than that. The last few fights in Tunic are an example of what not to do when you're trying to make your game into Dark Souls. It's all about parrying, it's all about dodge windows and all of that stuff. There are a few tricks you can use against the bosses, like this air character is very vulnerable to ice, so you can freeze it and then get some hits in. But generally speaking, you're raising your shield and you're dodging. It's not fun, not in the least bit, because this game does not have very tight controls, and does not have anywhere near the level of polish or care that your Dark Souls, your Sekiro, even your Salt and Sanctuary have in their combat system. You've got a 3-swing combo, you've got a shield, and you've got a dodge. That's all you get in this game. And somehow, the game presumes to start trying to be Dark Souls, to start making you do whiff punishing and all of that crap. There's no reason for a game like this to be so hard, but I guess the developer just really liked Dark Souls and said, hey, I like Dark Souls, so my Zelda-type game that I'm making is also going to be Dark Souls, because everything has to be Dark Souls. It's important to note that Link to the Past was not like this. Neither was Link's Awakening. Major boss in Link to the Past, you'd have to bounce back a laser, or hit it with the item you found in the dungeon, or exploit a pretty straightforward weakness. There was no dodge rolling in either of those games. You had to learn from your environments, learn the items you were getting, and use them to triumph. But apparently nowadays, everything just has to be Dark Souls. It's gotta be the stamina bar, it's gotta be your sword, it's gotta be the dodge window, it's gotta be the iframes. All of that stuff is apparently mandatory these days, or at least they are if you're Tunic's developer. But honestly, mediocre Dark Souls clone aside, that's not even the worst part of the game. If you're looking into this thing and you're thinking about buying it, you've probably heard something about the manual. Here it is right here on your screen. So as you can see, the thing is not written in English. It's written in some sort of foreign alien language. The idea here, I think, is to produce the same feeling you might have had if you were growing up in the early 90s and managed to get your hands on a Japanese game which only had Japanese instructions. And we all had that feeling back then where you were sort of trying to puzzle out how this game was supposed to work without actually knowing what any of this stuff said. For me, this makes me think of the Game Boy game Dragon Slayer, which I think I somehow pirated as an 8-year-old kid once upon a time. It was a very grand-looking game, and the title was very exciting, but of course it was in Japanese, and I could never figure out what the heck I was supposed to be doing in this thing. So in Tunic, you're playing a game that's not in English, and indeed not in any language, and as you play, you find these pages of this game manual. The artwork in the manual is gorgeous, and the big puzzle is trying to figure out what its message is without being able to read this indecipherable language. Pretty cool idea. Honestly, it's that manual thing that got me interested in the game in the first place. I loved manuals back in the day. I used to bring these things to school. I used to have cutouts of them on top of my walls and everything like that. They're awesome. Especially, the ones that had these old maps, like the old Zelda manual did, right? Which, I would literally study in between classes back when I was, in elementary school. So these manuals are really cool, and I love this idea Tunic had of bringing back that feeling of going through the manual and trying to piece things together based on what you were reading there. The language thing only made it more interesting. And, these manuals were of critical importance, I think, way back in those days, because, how were you going to figure things out on your own in those days before the internet? If you didn't have this top secret messages from Sahasrara, or however you're supposed to say that name, how would you ever figure out something like how you're supposed to use the flute, right? You dig it up from some forest and go play it in front of that windmill thing in the middle of Kakariko Village. How would you ever know that without reading about it in the manual? So the manual thing, I love that idea, and that's honestly why I bought the game in the first place. But like so many things based on nostalgia, we often forget the negative sides of that old manual culture. Back when I was a kid, and pretty much today as well, I always believed that there was something of a conspiracy going on between game companies and magazines. Take a game like Mortal Kombat. They had all these fatalities. Before the internet, there was no real way to figure out how to do these things. Not without buying one of the official player guides, or going down to the store and picking up an edition of Electronic Gaming Monthly, or one of those other magazines. I always thought that they did this on purpose. They wanted to sell extra magazine copies or extra strategy guides just so you could do these little fatalities to your friends. Now, I'm not accusing the creators of Tunic of trying to sell copies of Electronic Gaming Monthly. Although if they have shares in Google, I wouldn't really be surprised. Because the puzzles in this game are so obtuse, so obscure, so difficult to figure out, that you would think that they were trying to sell copies of those damn magazines. The final puzzle in the game, which you need to do in order to get the good ending, involves piecing together a bunch of scraps from the manual, maybe using Photoshop or something like that, or I guess getting a pen and paper, and then inputting 100-step code into your D-pad in order to open this stupid door. Just like with the Dark Souls thing, the game takes a good idea and just makes it too hard to be really enjoyable. It's so obscure. There's no way a normal human being is going to solve that without just Googling the damn thing. And that's the thing with Tunic. It promises you Zelda. It promises you Link to the Past. It promises you Link's Awakening. But you know what game it's really like? Does anyone remember Jurassic Park for the Super Nintendo? You probably don't, because it kind of sucked. But if you do remember it, you'll remember that the game had terrible combat, stupid puzzles, and very little indication of where a player was meant to go at any given time. And most importantly, it had a stupid manual that wasn't a help to anyone. Set aside its aesthetic, and this is what you're going to get from Tunic. So what's the overall verdict? Well, you should probably skip this one. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, make sure to like and subscribe. I'll probably make more.